Welcome to episode 2 of Monarchs at the Movies. This is Amir Kazemi, film critic at The Crown.
And I'm Chris Boucher, entertainment management, also at the Crown. So tonight we're going to be doing a sort of a overview of the Oscars for 2020, the best movie of 2019, and then our most anticipated movie of 2020. I'll take it over to Amir.
Sure. Um, I'm trying to think of the most, let's start out with the most shocking Oscar wins. Visual effects. Visual effects was down between Avengers Endgame, The Irishman, The Lion King, 1917, and Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. The last choice on the list for me was 1917. And 1917 won.
Well, it was like I was saying earlier. 1917 it looked more with visual effects. I mean, more practical effects, the way it looked, but every other movie had more CGI, and yet this one won.
I,
It is really surprising, and it did take me back when I learned the news.
it's it's not like the visual effects were bad. It's just that they were nowhere near the same level as their competitors.
It's like it's the odd sheep out of the bunch in this one, and it's just it's just weird to put it in this category when you have like blockbuster movies such as Avengers Endgame and Rise of Skywalker and The Lion King, where it was basically all done with CGI and visual editing and stuff.
yeah. With I feel that with Avengers Endgame, The Irishman, Lion King, maybe even Star Wars, they had to come up with new techniques with their visual effects. But 1917, they had techniques with the editing, of course, and they had to use CGI when merging cuts. But that's it. That's that's all I see in it. Am I missing something?
No, no. If anything, I wanted The Irishman to win because de-aging Robert De Niro that's a pretty big thing, and they did a really great job at it.
Yeah.
Hell, even Avengers Endgame and The Rise of Skywalker, they had stunning visual effects. But 1917, it's just no. It's just like you're all practical. I don't think you really deserve to be in this category in this situation.
A little bit of an aside, Roger Deakins won for cinematography for 1917 because of the natural visuals of the film. Why in the world it would win for visual effects, which is computer generated, I don't see, and I don't know if I'm ever going to fully comprehend. But it happened, and it was one of the very few unexpected surprises that I wasn't okay with necessarily. Um, I don't think there were any bad surprises anywhere else. Like we had for production design, it was we said during the last episode that it was down between 1917 and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and then Once Upon a Time in Hollywood 1, which is again not surprising because we knew it was down between the two of them, and it's a Hollywood movie, so Hollywood's gonna drool all over it and give it the win.
I think one thing that surprised me the most was actress in a leading role, Renee
Zellweger.
Zellweger in Judy.
Mm-hmm.
That really surprised me a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
thought it would have been. I definitely thought it would be. Um,
Saoirse Ronan.
Saoirse Ronan from Little Women
Yeah.
at the very least,
Mm-hmm.
or Scarlett Johansson.
Scarlett Johansson was very, very good in Marriage Story. It was her and an Adam Driver that essentially held the movie up. It I haven't seen Judy. I've seen of the movies here. We have let me go through the list for you. Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story, Saoirse Ronan for Little Women, Charlize Theron for Bombshell, and Renee Zellweger for Judy. Of those films, I've seen Marriage Story, Little Women, and Bombshell. Uh, Between those three, Scarlett Johansson probably deserved the win. I've heard very good things about Judy. That's all I know. If I'll know more once I get a chance to watch it, but I've heard she did very well. I don't know. Another one, Laura Dern won for Best Supporting Actress, and she played a divorce lawyer in Marriage Story. I think I said this before, but I really did not like her character. It might be the fact that I hated her so much as a character that means that she did a good job, and that's why she won. Yeah, I don't know how else to put that, honestly. With Best Animated Feature Film, Toy Story 4 won over Missing Link, Klaus, I Lost My Body, and How to Train Your Dragon. Like, you said you weren't surprised by that.
I'm not surprised. As much as I wanted How to Train Your Dragon to win, I kind of knew deep down that Disney usually just they assume that position like every year in the animated feature film category. There really has to be an animated movie that really knocks it out of the park. That isn't associated with Disney that can really topple them out of that area. As in Into the Spider-Verse, which was such a hit in both the pop culture realm and just general audiences. It really hit home. And also, I think the fact that this is the last Toy Story, at least we hope so, with Tom Hanks and Tim Allen as Woody and Buzz Lightyear. That probably was going to get the win no matter what. Did I want it to win? No. Am I surprised it won? Not really.
It was me being foolish enough to go by the trends that I had seen. We had Missing Link win the Golden Globe, which even the filmmakers on Missing Link were shocked that they won that. And I think Klaus won the Animators Guild Award or some award of that nature. So in terms of trends, the film that wins the Animators Guild Award usually wins the Oscar. So I said, okay, Klaus is probably going to win, even though I hadn't seen it. But I was wrong.
I still haven't heard of I Lost My Body. Is that...
I think it's on Netflix. So if you all want to watch it, it's up there if you have Netflix or if you have a friend's Netflix. But I don't know much about it. I've heard it's pretty good. So if you want, check it out. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was going to move on to the actor in a supporting role. I think that's another big surprise. Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Added two people from The Irishman, Al Pacino and Joe Pesci, were nominated, but Brad Pitt was the one that won.
People have been saying that Al Pacino and Joe Pesci canceled each other out because they had both roles in The Irishman, so they canceled each other out, leaving the rest. Brad Pitt's an amazing actor, and if he were nominated for a film such as Ad Astra, which is an interesting film, and it was essentially led by Brad Pitt, if he were nominated for that film over Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I would 100% be behind this Oscar. But Brad Pitt in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, he was good, he was fun, but I still I'm not behind it.
Too much fun of a movie, I'm assuming. Back to what we were saying last week about how Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it's a fun movie. And yeah, it does deserve its Oscar nominations, but winning in their categories, I think that's a different matter.
Yeah. So my two categories, the categories that I did not see coming whatsoever, directing and Best Picture. For directing, we had Martin Scorsese for The Irishman, Todd Phillips for Joker, Sam Mendes for 1917, Quentin Tarantino for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Bong Joon-ho for Parasite. I was thinking either Todd Phillips or Sam Mendes would win. I desperately wanted Bong Joon-ho to win for Parasite. And surprise, surprise, Bong Joon-ho wins for Parasite, and I lost it. I'm like, oh, okay. They're making good decisions now?
It was a good surprise. I
Yeah.
was surprised when I saw that.
And then Best Picture. Best Picture, we had Ford versus Ferrari, The Irishman, Jojo Rabbit, Joker, Little Women, Marriage Story, 1917, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Parasite. I expected, knowing the Academy, that they would choose Little Women or Marriage Story. It seemed like the typical Oscar Best Picture film. Last year we had, what was it, Green Book that won, which like
Hmm.
seemed like the nicely molded Best Picture film. So based on that, I'm like, okay, Little Women and Marriage Story, one of those two will probably
For
win.
me, it was between Little Women, Marriage Story, and Joker, considering how much popularity was behind it. And the
Yeah.
fact that it got 11 nominations, I thought, oh, Joaquin Phoenix is going to win. It probably might win Best Picture, too.
Yeah.
And then Parasite just came out of nowhere and just absolutely surprised me. Which is not a bad thing because the director, he's such a good because he's so good. And The Snowpiercer was another great movie of his that deserved a lot more recognition.
Mhm.
So it's good that he's finally getting the recognition he deserves.
I really didn't think they would do this. It's been only a few years, I believe, that foreign language film has been allowed to be even nominated for Best Picture. So this is the first foreign language film that has won Best Picture. I believe Roma was nominated last year for Best Picture, but it didn't win because it was nowhere near as good as Parasite.
Although a lot of people did want that to win,
Yeah.
and that was that. In fact, I think that was like probably one of the top three contenders that year to win, right up there with Green Book.
Did you hear what happened with Parasite with their speech?
I did, but not in full details though.
So they were giving their speech. The announcers. Let me go to the very beginning. The announcer came out, Jane Fonda, and she announced Parasite, and the entire cast and crew comes up. They start giving their speech. They're 2 minutes in, and they cut the lights on them, and they focus on Jane Fonda, the announcer. And the entire crowd, started by Tom Hanks and Charlize Theron, start shouting to turn the lights back on and let them continue their speech. It's the Best Picture winner. Why would you not let them give a longer speech than, what, 2 minutes? I'm pretty sure Renee Zellweger and Joaquin Phoenix gave like a 5 minute speech. So why would you not allow the Best Picture winner?
Especially Best Picture.
Exactly. So okay, you're cut for time. I'm sorry. It's the Best Picture winner. Let them go longer. So that was upsetting, but I really appreciated the fact that the
This-
audience
hmm
backed them up and made it happen. Let them go longer.
I will say this year, as opposed to last year, I think making the speeches, they did have a lot more time because I can remember back in the 2019 Oscars, they would just cut them, they wouldn't even really just cut them off. It would just like, the sound would just slowly go away and then
You could see their mouth moving.
they would play off the music and then you'd see their mouth moving and then it'd be off the stage with them, which is disappointing because because when Into the Spider-Verse won, they wanted to keep going for at least maybe another minute and then they just cut them off, which was really disappointing.
They just have a guy off stage with
Yeah.
a cane. They just pull him off. So overall, I would say pretty good Oscars.
Pretty good Oscars. A lot of surprises. Then there were, of course, the things we really weren't surprised about, like Joaquin Phoenix winning for Joker. I think everyone kind of knew that was going to
I would
win
be
in the
so
end.
upset if that didn't happen. I cannot think of a more deserving actor this year.
Hmm. But
Okay.
overall, yeah, good Oscars. Hopefully, Parasite winning just goes to
Opens the
show
door.
that it opens the door to future movies that are foreign films that have a better chance at the Oscars.
One of the things that people have said they'd want to see, and I wouldn't mind seeing myself, would be foreign actors who are in these foreign films being able to be nominated for, say, lead actor, lead actress, so on and so forth. I wouldn't mind seeing that because some of the actors, I'm blanking on their names, in Parasite were very good and for sure deserved some sort of recognition for their acting.
Mm. All right.
Okay, let's move on to
To
best
of 2019. So, I guess we're going to do our favorite movies of 2019 first, and then we'll do what we thought were the best of 2019.
Mhm.
So, I'm a big superhero and comic book fan. So, I got to say, hands down, I think Avengers Endgame was probably my favorite of 2019. More of because I grew up with Marvel and seeing how all those films accumulated into one awesome ending was just the time of my life. I don't care what Martin Scorsese says, it being like a theme park ride, I thought, hands down, it was like the best send off that you could possibly give.
Mhm.
And I know there's going to be more movies, but I think if this is their peak, it's basically Mount Everest of a peak. You make close to $3 billion. You become the film that makes the most revenue ever. It's just a great movie, and I just loved.
James Cameron has claimed that he's going to break that record.
He says that, but I'm like, it's been over 10 years since Avatar. I'm not sure how many people remember Avatar,
He's personally hurt by it.
He's like, if I make another Avatar, they'll come to theaters. They'll see. I'll make $4 billion.
How many does he have? Like four total set to like he has. I know at least two more. I thought I heard three more, which I don't know if I want to see that much Avatar. Like the first one had like the most bare bones basic story, but the visuals were nice. But like I don't see how
The fact it was 3 hours and they ran this story like hard. So I don't really know what kind of story you can go further than maybe a sequel. But apparently there's going to be like four of them. So I guess we'll see. Personally, I think it was just a great movie on its own, and I don't think it needs a sequel. But of course, this is Disney, and they've been churning out sequels longer than we can imagine.
So my favorite film, like my feel good favorite film of 2019 was David F. Sandberg's Shazam. It it didn't really take itself seriously at all. It was a fun superhero movie that messed around. It didn't care. It reminded me of what we like with Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. They had some seriousness to it, but for some reason Shazam reminded me of those movies. It's it's the campiness. I think that's it. It was funny. It was heartfelt. It didn't feel cheap in any way. I I don't know how else to describe it.
I think it's because it's relatable. I think what you like about it, and that's what I like about it. Because when you think about it, like kids these days, like on their phones and everything like that, and then you see Shazam like posting YouTube videos about using his powers, like that's something a kid would do.
Mhm.
He wouldn't he wouldn't be Peter Parker immediately and say, "Oh, I got responsibility that I got to use my powers." Well, he'd be like, "No, I want to make money and I want to use my powers for fun."
At first, when we saw Shazam, it was Zachary Levi who plays Shazam. He didn't act like how the kid actor acted in the film. Let me check his name. The kid's name was Asher Angel. He played Billy Batson, who became Shazam. It almost to me seemed like Asher would act older than his age, and then Zachary Levi would act younger, and they kind of overcorrected each other. I got used to it. They, as the film progressed, they hit a nice middle ground, and they were both acting like normal kids, and then the dynamic between Billy Batson and his friend Freddie, played by Jack Dylan Grazer, that was perfect. It was this perfect friend dynamic. I loved it to death. It was perfect.
I thought it was also very heartfelt with its portrayal of kids with disabilities and like the foster care system because
Of course.
you don't really see that a lot in
No.
today's media. And if you see the foster care system, you're immediately like, "Oh, it's horrible. Kids are
Yeah.
left to fend from themselves."
Yeah.
But no, the family that Billy ends up with is extremely kind, and I
It,
don't know,
wa-
they're also they act like a family, which is very heartfelt, and I enjoyed that part of it a lot.
in some ways, I want to say it wasn't cliched, and in some ways it was. I feel it played that line perfectly enough for it to be really good. The villain, Doctor Savannah, wasn't the greatest villain ever, but he was serviceable for this film. He was just villainous enough, and we cared just enough for the character of Shazam and Billy and Freddy to be evolved for the first film. I've heard they're making a sequel,
Hmm.
so I really want to see what they do with these characters.
The thing is, I think these days most villains aren't really that noticeable
Mm-hmm.
unless you have a really authentic goal like Thanos, or your just personality and your iconicness like the Joker is just
Mm-hmm.
like so noticeable.
Unless you're Jared Leto's Joker. Oh my
Unless
God,
you're Jared Leto's Joker. But if you're
he's
Joaquin
just
Phoenix,
annoying.
you get
Yeah,
an Oscar.
exactly. This is random, but between what is it, the five Jokers I can think of, we have Jared Leto, Joaquin Phoenix, Heath Ledger, Jack Nicholson, and Mark Hamill. Who's your favorite?
Now that's an interesting question because if we're going in terms of live action, even then that's like up in the air because I'm always a huge fan of Heath Ledger's Joker,
Mm-hmm.
but Joaquin Phoenix just he brought something new to the table
Mm-hmm.
and he did it in such a way that I felt like the Joker was like realistic instead of like this campy villain
Mm-hmm.
cuz when I watch The Dark Knight, even though it's one of the most realistic superhero movies I've seen, you could still feel like, oh, the Joker, he's kind of over the top. And so is Batman. You don't really think, yeah, there's a vigilante out there. But in the Joker with Joaquin Phoenix, you felt like, yeah, in today's climate of like school shootings and people out there who do such horrible things, he's not really that far off the mark for someone who I can believe would dress up and do something like that.
Where I stand is I like Joaquin Phoenix's performance more than anyone else's on that list, but I won't be able to determine if he's the best Joker until I see him up against Batman. I
Hmm.
don't know if we're going to ever see that. So, and this hurts to say, but Heath Ledger. But I like Joaquin Phoenix's performance more than Heath Ledger's so much. So much more. Um,
And then we got Mark Hamill,
is a
whose voice is
great.
iconic, and It's just some part of me will always say, yeah, I can't go against him. No matter who plays in live action, there's just some part that will always
He
say
might have the
Mark.
best. He might
Mark
have the
always has
best
the
laugh. Yeah.
he always has the best voice for it.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to move on to what we thought was the best of 2019. Now, I got to say, most of my films ended up in the Oscar category, which I thought were good. And in a way, I'm kind of torn because there were a lot of good movies this year. But if I really had to say one, I'd say 1917 because it's such a good war movie. The fact that it looks almost like one long shot,
Mhm.
and the fact that you can feel the tension and all around you with the cinematography, with the music, with the actors, it really puts you into the movie and what they feel. But of course, there are other really great ones like A Marriage Story, Little Women, and Joker, but the one who what I thought was the best was 1917.
One of the things in theaters, I'm not one to get scared necessarily easily or to jump in my seat, but when some of the shots rang out in 1917, I jumped in my seat and I'm like, okay, well, that was unexpected. Kudos to you, to the film. Good job. I honestly, the atmosphere it created was something to be applauded for sure. We've been talking about this film forever. I've been talking about this film forever, and I reviewed the film for the paper. Parasite was the best movie of 2019, in my opinion. Director Bong Joon-ho, which you've heard his name about 1,000 times so far. His previous work include Snowpiercer, which came out in 2013, which we talked about, which was based on a French graphic novel called Le Transpersonnage. It's essentially a train that goes around the globe, and it's essentially a dystopian world that's covered in snow and ice. That film starred Chris Evans, Jamie Bell, Octavia Spencer, John Hurt, Ed Harris, so on and so forth. And then Okja, which we talked about last week, was a Netflix film that dealt with the environment. This Parasite is probably one of the best foreign films I've seen in a long time or ever. The way it talks to you about poverty and class is unmatched. It's not preachy. What I said was it's the most non-didactic way to tell such a story. The story is there's a poor family that lives in a basement apartment, and the son of the family has a friend who drops by who is a student in college who tutors this girl, and he's going to study abroad, so he has the son of the poor family take over his position. When the son starts tutoring this girl, he finds out how wealthy this family is, and he decides to get a position for each of his family members in this rich household. And either they make a position for the family member or they scheme meticulously and get one of the workers in that household fired so they can replace them. It's an amazing movie. I love it to death.
And you see a lot of those themes from his previous movies into Parasite.
For sure.
With classism and
Yeah.
trying to like find your way so that you can, well, be heard, which I think is something that probably the Oscars actually looked at this year in terms and thought, I think Parasite brought that to the table and it deserved to win.
Okay, so next we'll talk about our most anticipated movie of 2020. We have one movie that's the same, so we'll talk about that one last. So, Chris, I'll let you go first. I'll talk about mine, and then we'll talk about the shared most anticipated of 2020.
So, as I said previously, I'm a huge comic book and superhero nerd, but and Birds of Prey came out last week, and I thought it was an okay movie.
Mhm.
But the one that I'm most excited for is Black Widow, because we've seen the character of Natasha Romanoff for the past 10 years in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but we haven't like really dived deep into her story. And what this movie is trying to tell us is what she's been doing since after the events of Captain America Civil War and where she comes into play in Avengers Infinity War. A prequel of sorts that isn't going to fill in too many gaps that we don't really need, but it's going to tell a compelling story nonetheless.
Mhm.
There's characters such as Taskmaster, a character I've been wanting to see live action for how many years now, and other heroes such as the Red Guardian, which is the Russian version of Captain America, and more of Natasha's backstory in the Red Room and how she became a gifted assassin and maybe how she got into S.H.I.E.L.D. I think it'll be a really compelling story. In fact, I'm getting Winter Soldier vibes, and that is my favorite Marvel movie.
Mhm.
And the fact that it is giving me that feeling going into it, I have, well, I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but I feel like it's going to be a really good story. And the fact that it's also a spy thriller, as opposed to just a superhero movie like Avengers Endgame or like Guardians of the Galaxy. Like this one feels more like in the real world kind of, and it's got me excited. I just can't wait for May.
There's one thing that I don't like about it is the fact that I don't understand why they didn't do this. Spoiler alert, why they didn't do this before Endgame. It would have added a lot more weight to what
That
happens in
actually,
Endgame.
that's what I agree with, and that's the one thing that kind of irritates me about this movie. Because in my mind, I'm like, do you know how much context and weight you could have added to her character had this movie came out, say, 3 years ago, and you pushed the Avengers Endgame back maybe a year or so
Yeah.
to having it like this year? Because a character, again, spoiler alert, that we all know dies like years down the road, we know she's going to survive. It just, I guess, takes away all the action that, or the suspense, I guess we're going to think. But nonetheless, I'm really excited. I just hope it delivers the narrative that it promises. And we get to see such a great film from a great character.
So, one of my most anticipated films of 2020 would be Dune, that I think it comes out sometime in December. I'd have to double check. I want to say like December maybe 20th or something. Dune is based on Frank Herbert's science fiction novel by the same name, and we had a previous version that came out in 1984, directed by David Lynch, and there was a unfinished, undone version done by a film, I believe, an Italian filmmaker by the name of Jodorowsky, and he came this story of this director trying to put together Dune, the unfilmable film, is something that I just, it's insane. So my personal favorite director, Denis Villeneuve, took on this task, and I know it's going to be amazing. I still have to finish the book. The book is very heavy and dense on lore, and it will take forever to get through and fully grasp, but I will do it for Denis Villeneuve because I know he will deliver an amazing film. His previous work, some of you may have heard of: Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, Sicario, Enemy Prisoners, Polytechnique, and Incendie. Those last two are his French language films. So Dune stars a large cast of famous actors and actresses: Rebecca Ferguson, Dave Bautista, Timothée Chalamet, Oscar Isaac, Jason Momoa, Josh Brolin, Zendaya, Stellan Skarsgård, and Javier Bardem.
Wow, that's
It's
a pretty
it's
stacked
a lot.
cast.
It's so I think that's because it's Dune and it's such a major landmark of a film. From what I've heard, the people who've seen clips of it have compared it to films and film series such as Lord of the Rings. They say visually it does what Lord of the Rings did in the early 2000s. It does what Star Wars did 40 years ago, which is exactly what I want to hear. It's People have said, and I said this a little bit earlier, Villeneuve hasn't done what Jodorowsky or Lynch did or tried to do, but Villeneuve has done his own thing. He's filmed the unfilmable, and I know I'm gonna love it. And I don't want to disappoint myself, but I know it's him. Villeneuve is one of the, if not the best director of our time, current time, in my opinion.
Well, that's debatable. But hey, I mean, a lot of his films have gotten nominated for Oscars in the past. Who knows? We might be discussing next year, like seeing Dune on the list.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So, our mutual most anticipated film of 2020 would be Bond 25, which got named No Time to Die. Releases April 10th, which is much sooner than we all think. What is that?
That's
2 months?
probably like maybe 6 weeks at the most.
I can't wait.
I can't wait either. This
Last Daniel Craig movie.
that we,
Daniel
that we
Craig
know that we
Bond
know
movie.
of. He
True.
said multiple times, "Okay, this is my last one. We'll offer you 25 million if you do it again." All right, I'm in. But
It's rumored that it's 2 hours and 54 minutes. A Bond film at that length.
wow.
It would be the longest Bond film they've ever done, and I'm okay with that. I don't mind.
I'm okay with it, but it has to be good.
Yeah,
Because when I walked into Spectre, I thought, oh, Spectre, James Bond villain organization. This should be a lot of fun. And then I walked out of it, and I was like, this was the best. It was large amounts of, like, nothing was really happening, and it just kind of bored me. I love Skyfall. Liked Casino Royale. Wasn't a big fan of the second one all that much. But
I could not tell you what Quantum of Solace was about. I cannot. I really can't.
Just
Things happen.
Quantum of Solace was just kind of dull. But I'm also really excited for No Time to Die because, I mean, superhero movies are like my first, and then spy movies are like my second. Between like Mission Impossible, Jason Bourne, and James Bond, like this cinches that this is going to be a good movie.
The director is a little bit of an unknown director, Cary Fukunaga, and he's done Beasts of No Nation, which stars Idris Elba. I think it was a TV movie, and it's about a child soldier in Africa fighting in a civil war. He directed 8 episodes of HBO's True Detective, and it was, I think, season 1 that he directed the 8 episodes of. And
I do like True Detective, so that does put a plus in my column.
And it's a pretty stylish show overall. So I believe, based on something like that, that he has the potential to make a competent Bond film. The stars of this Bond film, we have Daniel Craig, of course, and then Rami Malek is the villain.
I know he's going to be Dr. No. I think
that's been rumored.
That's been rumored.
I was going to say that. I don't know. I don't know. It would be an interesting way to go. It's called No Time to Die, so maybe that's something. There's something there. I don't know.
I mean, when you basically have the star of Queen as your villain, you're bound to move some heads towards your direction.
I at some point want to see like an actor like Sean Connery being the villain in a Bond film. That would be the funniest thing
It would be
to do.
funny, but I feel like it would be way
Too
too on the.
campy.
It would
Okay.
be not only campy, it would be way too on the nose. It'd be like I think that would take me out of the movie, like James
What
Bond
if
versus
there's what
James
if what
Bond.
if it's a cameo of some sort? Like he's like a taxi driver or
I'd
something.
be okay with a cameo.
Okay.
I would not be okay if they were like the villain. That would be a little too much in my opinion. But
Christoph Waltz is returning. I don't know how much of a role he has, but I really like him as an actor, so I would want to see him give a second shot at Blofeld and hopefully surpass what he did in Spectre. I didn't hate Spectre like most people did. I thought it was a fine Bond film. I did not like the ending at all. I think they just couldn't figure out how to end the movie and they just did something. Like they wrote it on the spot and they just filmed it.
for me, it was more they were just try. It felt like they were just trying to tie everything together,
Hmm.
and it was just such a bland way of doing it.
Hmm.
And then when you finally get to Ernest Blofeld and how he's the like half brother, like the step brother of
Yeah,
Bond,
okay.
that felt. I was
I'll
like,
give it to you.
I was like,
That's
wait a minute, that's a little bit like Austin Powers. So art imitating the art that imitated it, and I was like, okay, that's just a little
yeah.
weird for my taste. Hopefully, Christoph Waltz is like a motivating force to go up against
Hmm.
Malik's character. If it's Doctor No, so
We have Leah Seydoux returning as Bond's love interest, Madeline Swan. We have Ralph Fiennes returning as M. We have Ana de Armas, actress from Blade Runner 2049, coming in as Paloma. It's rumored that she's a CIA agent. Naomi Harris as Moneypenny. Ben Winshaw as Q, and Jeffrey Wright as
Jeffrey Wright.
Felix Leiter.
That is a good actor, and I'm glad that we're gonna see him in this movie.
He was in Casino Royale. He was.
Oh, he was.
He was. If you remember were they playing baccarat? What were they playing? Blackjack, something.
Something like that.
And he was in those couple scenes. So that was. I'm glad to see him again. He's pretty good.
He's
in
a terrific
Westworld.
actor, and I just like seeing him in whatever
Yeah.
he does. But the real person to look out for is Lashana Lynch who plays Nora. Is that her name?
Nomi.
Nomi, and she's the new 007 agent. Because I can remember there was a lot of controversy at of her casting because they said the new 007 and everyone was like, an African American woman playing Bond. This is like outrageous. And I was like, oh, I don't know what it's going to be, but sounds interesting. And then looking at the trailer, and I'm like, okay, this makes a lot more sense.
Mhm.
Like, you guys got worked up for nothing. And I'm interested because it's basically like she's the new face of like what MI6 is going to be about, and then James Bond is the old.
Mhm.
And maybe that's what'll go into the title of No Time to Die.
Yeah.
Because he's never going to die because he's James Bond.
I'm okay with it. I don't care. But James Bond is still James Bond. He may not be 007 in this film. We don't know. But James Bond will always be James Bond to me. So that's fine. A little bit about the premise. Bond has left active service and he's in, I want to say, Jamaica. And Felix Leiter comes to him with a mission to find some villain that has found a dangerous new technology. And that's all we know so far. The teaser trailers, have not revealed that much. We just know Rami Malek is the villain. There's some guy with this white, I think, what is it, a puka mask or something? I forget what they're called.
I don't know what it's really called either, but it like hides his disfigurement, which is sort of a trope with most Bond villains.
And I'm excited to see it. There's that level of mystery behind it. Like you mentioned that could be Dr. No. We don't know. The mystery that they've put behind this film intrigues me. So I really, really want to see it. Even if it weren't a Bond film, I'd probably want to see it. But the fact that it's a Bond film pushes it even further for me.
Do you think they're gonna push it in a way where it will end where Daniel Craig can actually leave? Like James Bond might fake his death, and that'll be actually it at the end of the movie, and he can finally say with a passion, "I'm not doing James Bond anymore." Or do you think they'll leave it open ended like they did in Spectre?
I don't know if they would kill James Bond. I feel like they would. People would be unbelievably pissed off when Sir Arthur Conan Doyle killed Sherlock Holmes. People were in the streets. I'm not saying people will be in the streets for James Bond. But I don't think people will be happy about something like that. I don't know.
It would definitely be unexpected if they ever did that.
Yeah. So this is a category that we're going to do every show, or we're going to aim for. We're going to recommend a film this episode, and we'll discuss it next episode, giving you the weekend to potentially watch the film. We'll also watch the movie, and we'll discuss aspects of it, and maybe the filmmaking style, the story, the achievements, so on and so forth. So the film I'm going to recommend for this week will be Sicario, which has my favorite director behind it, Denis Villeneuve, which we've talked about, and actually my favorite writer, Taylor Sheridan. Taylor Sheridan, the best way I can describe him is that his films, the films that he writes, are American movies. They're not like cowboy western movies, but they're about the American experience. They deal with troubles in the world, troubles that relate to people we see around us that we don't necessarily think about every single day. It's like the underneath the underworld of regular society. I don't know how to perfectly describe what he does, but it's everything he does has a message to it, and I truly like his writing and his stories.
So yeah.
So thanks for watching, everyone. This was episode 2 of Monarchs at the Movies. This is Amir Kazemi, film critic at The Crown.
And this was Chris Boucher, entertainment manager at The Crown. We hope to hear you guys next week.
See you next week.
See you next week.